Hi, my name is Jen Potter, and I am the host of Networking Now. Today, I am joined by Brenda Hernandez, who is a dear friend of mine and an amazing woman entrepreneur. So, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh my God, thank you, Jen, for the opportunity. It's such a pleasure being here with you.
Absolutely. And I'm just really excited that we're able to have a conversation outside of our normal conversations to talk a little bit more about business and the things that we do and why we do them. So I know everything about you, well, a lot of things about you, but if you want to tell our audience who you are and what you do, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, so it's always so hard to figure out the right words to introduce myself to the audience. But in a nutshell, I am Brenda and I am a motivational speaker. I am a real estate investor, and I just recently started a professional home staging and Airbnb styling and consultant business. My passion is really just working with women and giving them or helping them find their confidence and helping them to really trust and believe in themselves.
And that's something that right out the gate that I feel like we connected on, right? And we haven't been friends for a crazy amount of time, but it almost felt like from the moment I met you, like we were long-term friends. And then come to find out we actually live right down the street together and our kids go to school together. So we had no idea when we met,
Yeah.
and we actually met at a conference. So I was actually a speaker and it was a conference that you were attending, and we just instantly connected. And it's amazing how that just kind of happens, right? And throughout all of these different journeys, we're able to connect on so many different levels. And one of the things that I found really intriguing was what you do for your business. And so one of the businesses that you've been doing for a pretty decent amount of time is real estate investment. So tell me a little bit about, what that looks like. And there's a certain type of real estate investment and type of work that you do that I recently learned about. So if you want to tell everybody what that looks like, you
Yeah,
can jump.
so it's so funny how it all started. It was all by pure coincidence. In around 2017, my partner Roger came home. He's an artist, and he was like, I need to figure out what am I going to do if this well ever dried up. And so he came home one day and he's like, hey, I think that I want to start investing in real estate to really secure our future. And I really didn't know anything about real estate. I knew nothing about real estate, but my intuition immediately gave me a signal of like, whatever this is, you need to get into it. And so my response was, I'm all for it. Like, I want in. Like, how do I get into this? And he was like, all right, well, you're going to have to put in some capital contribution. I'm like, okay, I'm not really sure how I'm going to do it, but I'm for it. Let's figure this out. So through just like doing my regular like praying and meditation, like I had an aha moment. I was like, you know what? I'm going to liquidate my 401k. And so I did exactly that. I contacted my 401k. I had a conversation with them, found out like what were the penalties, et cetera, et cetera. And I decided that for me, it just made sense to go that route. And so that actually allowed us to start buying our first multi unit in the state of Maine. Through that space, I really became super empowered because I no longer needed my full time job to sustain me financially or to help sustain the families financially. And so around 2020, right around COVID, I started to grow super frustrated with corporate, and I felt limited, and I felt like I had so much more to give and was kind of being boxed. And so I sat with my partner, we had a conversation. He was like, listen, just leave your full-time job and let's focus and grow our real estate business. And so through that space, I was able to leave my full time. Roger and I had a second conversation after I left. And I said, I'm really digging this whole short term rental space, this avenue. And so he's like, okay, well, let me buy you out of our portfolio. And then you take that money and you do what you want with it. And so that's exactly what we ended up doing. And that actually put me on the path to buying short term rentals. And so today I own 7 short term rentals. And through that space, I realized I had a real knack for interior design. And so then I was like, okay, I think I'm going to start a home staging and Airbnb styling business. And so last year I was like, okay, let me play with this, see how it goes. I worked with a few different clients. It really was growing and taking off. And so I decided, all right, I'm going to make this like a legit thing. And so in November of 2023, I started Designs by Her.
Which is so amazing because that's pretty much right around the time that we connected. So it was right at the time that you really started making all of these bigger changes.
Yeah.
And, I've been lucky enough to hear your full story and all of the things that you have gone through in the past to kind of get to where you were. But, you know, it's it's funny because you said a coincidence, right? And I don't believe in coincidences. I'm a
I
firm
know.
believer you're exactly where you're supposed to be at all points in time, but
Yep.
that's just the hippie in me, right? And I know you believe that too. And it's funny because you put it out there and you're like, this is what I want to do, this is where I want to be. And sometimes we don't know what that's going to look like, but life for you hasn't always been super easy. You made some really hard choices, and especially as a mom to kind of get to where you are. And I think one of the biggest things that has really inspired me, and through our conversations especially, is how you got to where you are, to where you are now, and where you're going to continue to go. So if you want to kind of dig a little bit into what that looked like for you to kind of make that big leap, because it wasn't something that just happened overnight. You made this decision because you've had to make hard decisions in your past, but in order to become that strong mom to change your life, your story is unique. So I know that you're not originally from here, right?
Correct. Yep. So my parents moved from Puerto Rico to Massachusetts when I was 4 years old. And as you can imagine, that was just like a huge culture shock. At the time, they didn't speak or write English. And so they had to learn how to navigate that. Um, so got here when I was 4. Around the age of 15, they decided they wanted to move back to the island. And that was another culture shock because at that point, I lived in Taunton the majority of my life, spoke mostly English. And I had like my friends. And so it's like high school, like we were like, okay, we're moving. So we move, and it was a big change for us because we ended up moving to the middle of the island where really there was nothing close by. Like the nearest mall was probably a 45-minute to an hour long drive. So it was very different from what I was accustomed. And immediately I just knew that that wasn't going to be my forever. Like something told me that there was more for me. And so what I ended up doing at the age of 15 is I went, opened up a savings account, and my mother would give me $10 a week for lunch money. And I actually started banking that money. Fast forward to when I turned 18 and high school officially informed that I was going to be graduating, I actually pulled out all of the money and went and booked a one-way ticket back to Massachusetts. And so, yeah, I remember going home and telling my mom, I'm leaving. And she's like, well, I don't support that. And I'm like, well, that's okay. I respect it, but I've already bought my ticket. And she was in shock. She's like, how did you have the money? Like she had no idea that I had
Right.
been conjuring this plan since I was 15 years old. So, mom trying to do her best. She was like, all right, well, I can't give you a lot, but here's $100. Like, the doors are open if you ever need to come back. And I was like, thank you. I love you, but I'm not coming back. And so, yeah, I moved to Massachusetts. My best friend and her family received me with open arms, and it really just shaped my future and my path. And I realized, like, now, when I tell this story, I, I was, it was just so brave. And I always knew to follow my instincts. I always knew to listen to my gut. And so as my life has continued to shape and form, I can't tell you I ever envisioned that I would be where I am today, Jen. It's really just allowing for me, God, to guide me to exactly where I need to be and to be brave enough to take that one step after the other. And yeah, there's been some ups and downs, most certainly. But now when I look back, I'm like, wow, what a journey and what a blessing.
Right. And we have to go through those things, right? And you started listening to yourself from a very early age. And I think this is where our connection really kind of got solidified, right? Where you made these changes, you listened to your gut. I was very similar, but I ignored a lot of those things as a young adult. I mean, I did kind of shape my own path, but it took me a long time to really listen to those instincts. But one of the things that we connected on was one of the things that I focus on is following our gut instinct, right? Because I mean, that's what we naturally do. And but it's that gut instinct that I follow, that it wasn't the fact that we just had a connection. Your mom that, you amaze me with all of the amazing things that you do. And one of the things that when we sat down, you're like, you need to meet my daughter. And it was just, the funniest thing to me, because, and I get emotional when I think about it. I've said this to you several times. I don't know what it is. Every time I think about your daughter, I start to cry, because I have, like, we formed that connection and I'm watching her change. But you're like, you need to meet my daughter, because at your age, you follow that gut. She knew that it existed, but she was ignoring it. And then the second she started to follow it, me and her started to work together, and we
Hmm.
developed this amazing bond. And every time I see what she's doing, like watching her in her new career and watching what she's doing, and she's growing and learning, and she doesn't need me other than being a cheerleader for her. And that is like the biggest thing in the entire world for me. Like, it's so humbling, but it's so amazing, because one of the things that I truly wanted to focus on was women empowerment and how that all kind of comes together. And that it was like this full circle. Like, your intuition was to talk to me and to have the conversations, and we made these
Hmm.
amazing connections. And we have so many amazing things that I want to continue to talk about, when it comes to this, because she is like that example of, you went through all of these things to prove to your daughter that you could change your life. You could find something better. There's so much more out there for us. And the earlier you learn that in life, the more you're gonna to live and grow, right? Because I feel like sometimes it takes us a really long time to kind of get there, where you were 15 and you're like, if I bank all this stuff, like, I'm out, peace, right? And I mean, I moved out when I was 17 too. So, like, I feel like, but mine was almost forced. So,
Hmm.
and my parents, like, they supported me but didn't support me, so it was like this weird, like, it was kind of very similar to you, right? Like, you
Hmm.
have this opportunity, but you're like, no, that's not what I'm supposed to do. And you listen to that, and it brought you through all of these stages and all of these amazing things that you've done. And I feel like we have so much more to talk about, but we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to dive a little bit deeper in all the things. So stay tuned, we'll be right back.